Kia ora, hello, I'm Philip Duncan. Thank you for joining us for our Thursday weather update for September 29th. There is a lot to talk about today, so let's get straight into it. On the animated wind map today from Weather Watch and IBM, showing where the thunderstorms are, but it also shows big high pressure zone to the east of New Zealand and another one near Tasmania. The winds look a little bit fast on this map, a little energetic, but it does clearly show you where the northerly airflow is coming down across New Zealand, but also how this second high is producing a colder southerly down here in the south. In the middle of all of this, there's a low pressure zone just departing Australia with plenty of thunderstorms, now mostly out to sea, but that low is drifting towards northern New Zealand this coming weekend and produces some rain. So that's where we start. Rainfall totals for the next 3 days. This is from this morning. Now the bulk of the rain will be overnight Friday and across Saturday, but the biggest totals will be in the north and northeast of the country. So mostly eastern Coromandel Peninsula and East Cape, where you're getting between 70 and 90 millimetres of rain. Elsewhere nearby, Northland, Auckland and Bay of Plenty, you're a lot more borderline for a rain warning in that sort of 50 to 70 millimetre mark, and remember, it's spread over 3 days. There's also some heavy rain around Takaka and Golden Bay, getting up around that 60 millimetre mark. Hopefully no problems, but some slips are possible. And then the driest part of New Zealand, Fiordland, our rainforest, and Stewart Island with just a few showers in the forecast. Over in Australia, this is just more of an interesting feature, but this rain falling in Western Australia, 800% above average, and we're talking about 70 or 80 millimetres falling, which is stunning for Western Australia. And this is also going across 3 major deserts. So quite a big system and an unusual one. Now over on the eastern side, fairly dry, but that low pressure zone that's on its way to New Zealand, dropping about 25 millimetres for Sydney over the next day or two. So let's take a look at the forecast. Here we are for Friday, the last day of September. The low from Sydney moves further out towards New Zealand, and the squash zone between the low and the high gets a bit more intense. So those windy east to southeast winds carry on through the coastal areas with showers. In New Zealand, we're a little too far away from it all for those winds to kick in just yet, but they will develop overnight Friday going into the weekend. In the meantime, that southerly comes into the North Island, meets the northerly, and the two kind of fade out. But that makes for convergence, which is when the clouds build up and you end up with rain and showers. So it's going to be a cloudy and showery end to the week for the North Island. Now, as we go into the weekend, in comes that Australian low, dumping rain in the north of the country, and it's patchy elsewhere. Drizzly sort of weather and dry spells. It's not going to be raining non-stop, but it's slow moving. So that's why the rainfall totals really start to accumulate up here in northern areas. Mostly dry in the south, big belt of high pressure from Tasmania right across over to the Pacific Ocean, so settled for you. And then the squash zone in between means from Brisbane all the way down to coastal parts of Victoria in the east, you're seeing those southeasterlies and those showers continue. Now by Sunday, the low weakens quite a bit around the North Island, so the isobars are more stretched out, so it's not as windy and longer dry spells. But with the sun coming out and it's still a mild northerly for northern areas, there might be a few thunderstorms or heavy downpours popping up on Sunday afternoon. And showers continue along eastern areas, moving further inland for some parts of Queensland. Now next week, low pressure continues to be stuck around the north of New Zealand, but it is continuing to unravel and fall apart. And now that southerly flow that's been elsewhere gets caught up into the mix a wee bit more. So you just might notice the temperatures dropping a little bit in northern New Zealand while it remains cold for those of you in the south. That rainmaker in Australia drops further down, Kalgoorlie and Esperance getting rain in areas where you wouldn't normally be getting it. And as we move through to Tuesday next week, now we get to see the next big significant feature which is forming this high. This is a very significant high pressure zone because it's growing in size and it's influencing the weather across New Zealand and Australia. So not too much to talk about on the Tuesday with that high, other than this cold front coming into the south of New Zealand here. But it's Wednesday's map that truly shows it. If someone was to ask me, and I have been asked this before, and I've said this before, show me the classic weather map for a polar blast in New Zealand, this is it. A powerful high over Tasmania shaped north to south, low pressure southeast of New Zealand. So in between, there's that squash zone, those southerlies being dredged right up, all the way up to the top of New Zealand. So we're already seeing the snow icon showing up for inland parts of Southland around Wednesday next week. There's also a wintry southerly coming in over here for Perth and Western Australia. And then in between it all, warm, windy, gale force northerlies from Adelaide to Melbourne, maybe even into parts of Sydney and Hobart. Not so much the wind, but at least the northerly flow coming down. But this high is everything, the shape of it. If it changes from north to south to being a wide high from west to east, that gets rid of the southerly, replaces it with a windy westerly. So this is critical, but next Wednesday, certainly a chance for severe weather across New Zealand and Australia. So put it into your diaries. Let's have a look quickly before I go at Hurricane Ian. It made landfall this morning, New Zealand time and Australian time, centered right here, south of Tampa. That's the good news, but Category 4, that's the bad news. Significant storm, one for the history books. I would imagine the name Ian will be dropped, won't be used anymore, like Katrina's no longer used, or Andrew. So a major, major storm. Just quickly before I go, the power of this storm as it came on through. The central air pressure was 940 hectopascals. The sustained wind, 240 kilometres an hour, sustained. There are no parts of New Zealand and Australia that get anything like that, other than when a Category 5 cyclone comes into Queensland. That's pretty much about it. So this is a serious storm, and it's going to be with Florida for another day or so, and then it moves further up. So Hurricane Ian finally making landfall in Florida today. That is all from me. We'll see you again on Friday with our next update.